Hello everyone, this is Power. As I'm sure you're aware, I'm now the former Chief Foreign Affairs Officer of Exodus. During my time at CFAO, I chose to withhold the full scope of my actions, views, and opinions from the general public in order to maintain Exodus' relatively neutral position within the community. This, unsurprisingly, meant that very few people, both inside and outside of Exodus, knew exactly what I did at CFAO or what opinions I held on a number of issues. Over the coming weeks and months, I look forward to potentially sharing with you more about my time at CFAO. I think that I held a relatively unique view of the community that very few people ever get to truly experience, and it may be helpful to provide insight into the more diplomatic and political aspects of the community. As CFAO undoubtedly made a number of decisions which affect the course of Exodus, and in some cases, the entire community. Some of these decisions were made without the full knowledge of the entire Exodus High Command. Now, in saying that, I want to be clear that I always acted in what I believe to be the best interest of Exodus. I established a solid basis of trust with Exodus High Command, who placed a high degree of confidence in my judgment. In case where information was withheld, it was done so as to isolate risk, as opposed to malice or deception. I am confident they would agree with that assessment. With that in mind, I would like to share with you one of the most important decisions I made as CFAO of Exodus without the full knowledge of High Command. That is, the decision to instigate a conflict between NRI and the Colonial Federation. In this video, I will be sharing evidence which proves my connection to particular events or provides a better understanding of a particular situation. I will not, however, share information which could be used to draw connections for myself to various individuals within the community. As with any major operation of this scale, a small team is involved. In this case, the vast majority of the individuals involved are outside of Exodus and members of other clans. As a standard, I will not disclose those connections without their explicit consent and approval. This operation in particular was important to me because it directly damages the reputation and career of a neutral individual within the community, Char 3. As a result of my actions, he is removed from the Colonial Federation after being accused of espionage, an intentional result of my plan. He is the only neutral individual who has ever been wrongly removed due to my actions at CFAO, and I felt a personal obligation to clear his reputation as soon as reasonably possible. Now that Exodus has been dissolved and I'm no longer acting CFAO, I feel that I could reasonably share this information publicly. So to begin, let's talk about the motivations and objectives behind my decision to instigate conflict between NRI and Colonial Federation. It is important to understand that almost nothing in the community exists in a political bubble. The Colonial Federation is no exception. While the Colonial Federation itself is a relatively new clan, having been founded in roughly December 2016, the vast majority of its Senate and critical leadership were simply recycled from the Commonwealth, Shadow Sniper's previous clan. And surprisingly, many ideological quirks carried over from the Commonwealth into the Colonial Federation. While full political analysis of the Colonial Federation is outside the scope of this video, I'd like to summarize the most critical factors which led to my decision. First, since the inception of the Colonial Federation, it is abundantly clear that they intended to become the dominant clan in the community. This view is fairly common in the Colonial Federation, and Shadow Sniper himself directly said so in no uncertain terms. Additionally, previous conversation with Shadow Sniper, he admitted that during the Commonwealth, it was his intention to use the Vast War as a stepping stone to targeting Exodus in an eventual war. It was his belief at the time that Exodus was the dominant clan in the community, and that passing Exodus would be critical to establishing the Commonwealth's dominance. This sense of manifest destiny was also in the Colonial Federation, and not particularly isolated to Shadow Sniper himself. Vast of Reach, the colonial leader and founding member of the Colonial Federation, was explicit in expressing interest in degrading Exodus, and the vast majority of their Senate and federal government held clear distaste and hatred for Exodus. I was also aware of Shadow Sniper's time that the Colonial Federation was limited, and that he would likely resign or become inactive during the summer months. Given his previous focus on establishing a legacy and reputation, I was concerned that he may target Exodus as a last hurrah before departing. If that were not the case, his departure would transfer power to a more hostile Senate, which would only increase hostilities and increase the likelihood of potential conflict. While it was clear that the Colonial Federation was militarily and politically incapable of challenging Exodus, it became apparent that the short-term positive relationship between Exodus and the Colonial Federation was merely a pragmatic tool. That, if given the opportunity, they would attempt to attack and dispose Exodus from its position. Their Chancellor and Senate held clearly hostile views toward Exodus, and it is likely that these views would continue to grow more severe over time. This was compounded by my interest in resigning. Since January, I had been considering resignation from my position within Exodus for personal reasons. However, I was dedicated to ensuring Exodus was in a comfortable position diplomatically before I left. I was aware of the threatening views the Colonial Federation had, and how this might affect exits after my departure. Given my personal experience and knowledge of the number of Colonial Federation leadership, I was better equipped than any other individual within Exodus to deal with the Colonial Federation in a wartime environment. Should war break out after I resigned, the Colonial Federation would pose a much greater threat to Exodus. If left unchecked, they could pose a real threat to Exodus's long-term security. I saw the Colonial Federation as the single most pressing threat to Exodus's long-term dominance, a concern only made more severe by my potential resignation. I determined that, before resigning the CFAO, I had to significantly degrade the Colonial Federation's position so as to render them non-threatening to Exodus and ensure our continued position within the community. Now that we understand the motivation objective, I'd like to discuss the development and execution of this objective. While I'd love to say that I had this fully composed plan to destroy the Colonial Federation back in January, that's not the case. The plan was fluid and a largely improvised operation, changing in response to new assets, capabilities, and windows of opportunity. This operation really hinged upon the targeted exploitation of a few critical assets to achieve a particular goal. So now let's start at the beginning. During the Vast War, the failure of the Commandos, I tasked myself with developing a reasonable intelligence apparatus for Exodus. The Vast War represented an intelligence failure I was set on avoiding. As a result, for the last few months I oversaw the development of a modest intelligence network targeted at clans of concern to Exodus. The rise of the Colonial Federation in late 2016 and early 2017, I determined they represented a clear concern to Exodus and that we needed to monitor their development. So, by January 17, 2017, I had direct access to the Colonial Federation's government chat on Discord. I also managed to obtain direct access to a number of colony-level Discord servers in the January timeframe, allowing me to more effectively monitor their behavior and interest. This government-level access and access to colony Discord servers would remain largely unchallenged and unchanged until the collapse of the Colonial Federation. On February 18th, inter-colony war was declared in the Colonial Federation. This caught my attention as it was the first inter-colony conflict to start within the Colonial Federation. In this particular war, a number of colonies targeted Armas, the largest colony in the Colonial Federation. This provided me with an opportunity. I wanted to degrade, destabilize, or destroy the Colonial Federation, and I knew that if I could artificially fan the flames of this war and create true hostility, this war could potentially destabilize the Colonial Federation. Now, real life is a great tool for learning, and this is no exception. Over last year, we've seen Russia utilize the intentional targeted leaking of information, or weaponized leaking, to great effect. That leaks, if performed in a timely, targeted manner, can be used to create a particular political reaction. While I didn't have the means of directly impacting the war, I had direct access to Armas chats and the capability to leak information from these chats at will. So, after a quick risk assessment, on February 18th, the same day war was declared, I created the Armas Leaks account on Discord and posted inflammatory logs from the Armas Discord server, specifically disrespecting other colonies, toxic secession, and generally poor behavior. You should see proof that I own this account on the screen at this time. The objective behind this leak was simple. First, I wanted to observe how the Colonial Federation and community would react to leaks and see if it was a viable plan moving forward. Secondly, I wanted to generate mistrust and conflict in the Colonial Federation, hoping that they would assume another colony leaked these chat logs as a means of conducting the recently declared war. Those objectives were both met pretty effectively. The community appeared to be interested in the Colonial Federation's internal drama and fanned the flames in a manner that forced the Colonial Federation to respond. Their members attempted to do modest, if failed, damage control, and Vash and Preventor, the two moderators in the community chat, attempted to identify who owned the leak account. Internally, the federal government showed some concern about the leaks and believed they were part of the war effort. This was an overall satisfactory response and made it clear that leaks moving forward would be viable. While the leaks failed to truly ignite the war and the war ended shortly after, the overall effect the leaks had was satisfactory. Armas leaks demonstrated that properly executed leaks could create a significant reaction that could be reasonably directed and controlled. It also demonstrated that the Colonial Federation's government was both interested and vulnerable to leaks and took them seriously. While they failed to significantly destabilize the Colonial Federation, they did help to build long-term mistrust and serve as proof of concept for leaks in the future. The next major breakthrough occurred on February 25th, when I gained direct access to NRI's HiCom chat, an asset which was also maintained throughout the collapse of the Colonial Federation. Access to NRI HiCom chat provided me with a fairly unique opportunity. Given my already established diplomatic network at CFAO and access to Colonial Federation chats, I was aware of tensions between NRI and the Colonial Federation. However, with the breach of NRI's HiCom chat, I had clear and explicit evidence of these used in NRI itself, in the form of SARS saying war was imminent, NRI leaders expressing interest in assassinating and executing Colonial Federation personnel, and a number of other important images. The content of the chat was clearly inflammatory and is perfectly suited for leaking. However, as I logged the chat, I realized something unusual. I had administrative rights to NRI's Discord server. Suddenly, this intelligence gathering opportunity developed into something more. After another quick risk assessment, I decided upon a course of action. With some assistance, I'd wipe NRI's Discord chat server and leak particular aspects of NRI's HiCon chat. The objectives here were fairly simple. First, I wanted to observe how NRI would react to leaks and see if it was viable for future use. Second, I wanted to generate distrust and conflict within NRI. Third, I wanted to publicly notify Colonial Federation of these NRI discussions in hopes that it would push them towards conflict with NRI. And fourth, I wanted to frame the leaks in such a way that NRI would believe the Colonial Federation perpetrated the attack on their server and pursue conflict with the Colonial Federation in retaliation. Now, before we continue, I think it's important to realize that I began to formulate a doctrine and a real strategy with these leaks. If you recall from before, I was interested in degrading the Colonial Federation so as to make them a non-threat to Exodus. Up until now, with the use of Armas leaks, these efforts were based upon the idea that Exodus itself would need to be the Colonial Federation's main opponent. However, when considering use of these leaks, I realized I can reasonably try to instigate a conflict between NRI and the Colonial Federation, effectively removing Exodus from the equation entirely and avoiding any real danger to our clan. This is a truly massive development for a number of reasons. First, as CFAO is always fairly risk-averse. While I understood that Exodus members enjoyed war, I also understood that Exodus was historically more stable during times of peace, and the war with a clan such as the Colonial Federation was a much more risky proposition. However, to most effectively damage a clan of that size, war is likely needed. While I was confident in our ability to defeat the Colonial Federation if necessary, I was hesitant to launch what would effectively be a preemptive conventional war against them. More importantly, war against NRI would be an inevitable mess. NRI would invariably draw their allies Orda and DA and turn the conflict with the Colonial Federation into metaphorical Vietnam. It's important to realize that unlike major clans in the community, lesser clans such as NRI, Orda, and DA show no real interest in following reasonable practices or doctrines. During DA's war against Exodus, they lied about ROE, lied about map theft, and spread clear and intentional disinformation about Exodus. They don't have any real value in sound political roleplay, and would simply change the rules to suit whatever interests they had. I've dealt with them for the better part of 5 months, and even I failed to realize how disgusting these clans were in a timely manner. The Colonial Federation lacked the political and diplomatic knowledge Exodus had, and I believe that, if they entered a conflict with these clans, it could potentially be a long-term, bitter conflict that would cripple the Colonial Federation's time and resources. An NRI vs. Colonial Federation war would remove any real danger to Exodus, while significantly degrading the Colonial Federation and taxing their leadership and membership. This was a clear objective and doctrine that I formulated just prior to beginning the NRI Leak series. The decision was relatively spontaneous, going from concept to implementation in a matter of hours. And so on February 25th, I removed all non-officers from the NRI server and deleted all chat channels. Afterwards, I proceeded to leak select chat logs from NRI server to the general public, a series of leaks which would continue for several days. All of this was conducted the same day that NRI's HiCon was originally compromised, making it a relatively brief and high-intensity encounter. For those interested, I do indeed have ownership of the NRI Leaks account, as you can see on the screen now. While the leaks did not achieve all the original objectives, they were still massively successful. The NRI, even more so than the Colonial Federation, absolutely panicked in response to the leaks. Over the course of the following week, a number of members, including an officer, were removed under suspicion of espionage. This level of paranoia within the NRI was easily exploitable and did present a destabilizing force to their higher government, and we elected to continue the leaks for nearly a week following the initial release. The Colonial Federation also took the leaks very seriously. I was always realistic in my belief that the leaks would not spark a war, and the intention was truly to light a fuse between the two clans. While the leaders of both sides discussed the potential of war, neither clan seemed willing to make the first step towards actual aggression. The NRI leaks, however, rapidly changed that dynamic within the Colonial Federation. Within 2 hours of the leaks, the Colonial Federation called an emergency Senate meeting to discuss their course of action. While Shadow Sniper himself wanted to pursue war, as you can see on the screen now, and expressed this to me during a private conversation, his Senate was less willing. Instead, they elected to begin formal intelligence espionage efforts against NRI in direct response to these leaks. NRI's political response was much more limited, likely because of their inability to successfully identify the individuals responsible for leaks. Nonetheless, I considered NRI leaks to be a major success. While potential for conflict had been brewing for weeks, even months, there was no real sign of escalation. However, within a 12-hour period, I was able to force the Colonial Federation Senate into emergency session to discuss declaring war, and I was able to convince their chancellor war was needed. And while war was not declared, I was able to force the Colonial Federation to begin espionage efforts against NRI. What interested me more was the decisions by the Colonial Federation Senate. Schaus never wanted war to declare war, but when communicating with assets and reading the government chat, it became clear that many of the colonies were not confident in their ability to conduct war. While Schaus never bragged about holding 150 members, his Senate was not equally confident. They viewed NRI as a real challenge and threat. This was primarily the reason they didn't pursue an immediate conflict, not because they didn't believe the action was justified, but because the Senate did not believe the Colonial Federation was ready for war. This intrigued me. As I discussed previously, the intention was to merely harass the Colonial Federation and bog them down in a long-term conflict. I didn't believe the claims of 150 members, although I did assume the Colonial Federation was reasonably capable in a war-ready clan. However, the fact that they had second thoughts over the readiness to fight NRI was intriguing. This is when it really occurred to me that perhaps I could actually kill the Colonial Federation via war with NRI, as opposed to simply bogging them down. So fast forward 3 days, and on February 28th, a fairly fortunate event happens. Char 3 decided to join the Colonial Federation and become a foreign affairs officer. This was an unexpected gift. By now I knew that although the Colonial Federation intended to declare war, they were not ready. Their government chats, however, Vash of Reach and a few other Colonial Federation officers discussed conducting a possible false flag operation against NRI to justify their declaration of war. Once it arose that Char 3 was added to the government chat, within 30 minutes I quickly made another account, Colonial Federation Leaks, with a Z, and leaked the false flag discussion to the community chat. You can see my ownership of that account on the screen now. Context is important here. Char 3 tried to join Exodus months prior, also for a foreign affairs position. At the time, we had reason to believe he was a spy for NRI and rejected him. He then attempted to join the Colonial Federation, who also rejected him. This meant that when he joined the Colonial Federation, he already had a history of being a potential NRI spy. Knowing this, I decided to exploit this association. The leaks were strictly about the Colonial Federation's plans to false flag NRI, information that NRI spy, like Char, would want to gather and potentially make public. This association made sense, and the Colonial Federation took it without question. The only exception was, in a strange twist of irony, Shao Sniper, who specifically told me that he wasn't entirely convinced Char was a spy. I casually dismissed his doubts and moved on. The intention behind Colonial Federation Leaks, with a Z, or Char Leaks, was fairly simple. As discussed previously, the objective was now to instigate a war between NRI and the Colonial Federation. Under NRI Leaks, the intention was to mainly provoke the Colonial Federation into declaring war against NRI. With Char Leaks, however, the role reversed. In this case, NRI was presented with a clear and present threat, proof that the Colonial Federation was considering false flag operations against them. The Colonial Federation in Char was provided a reasonable belief that NRI was attempting to infiltrate the Colonial Federation. Char, the NRI spy, joined 3 days after these leaks were published. From the Colonial Federation's perspective, this would hopefully be seen as an act of espionage, which I hoped would force their hand into declaring war. Unfortunately, this set of leaks was not productive, and perhaps even backfired. NRI's reaction was muted. It quickly became clear, following the leaks, that NRI and Order were simply too afraid to be the first mover in a war, and would sit back indefinitely, waiting for the Colonial Federation to attack first. The Colonial Federation Senate also got cold feet about declaring war. Now that NRI knew their intentions, they felt their element of surprise, and by extent their chance of victory was greatly reduced. Overall, this leak set was a misjudgment, and appeared to reduce the chance of war breaking out. Then on March 14th is when things really changed. By now, over 2 weeks had passed since the last major leak set, and there had been few opportunities to advance the situation. I have included that, while I significantly escalated tensions between the Colonial Federation and NRI, and espionage was now being conducted between the two clans, both appeared to be either incapable or unwilling to actually fight a war in the short term. Colonial Federation was preparing, but there was no indication that war was imminent in the coming weeks. However, on March 14th, I signed on to Discord and realized that Ricky Lane's Discord account had been compromised. Now, before I begin here, I want to be absolutely 100% crystal clear about this. I was not involved in compromising his account, nor do I know who did it. I've heard speculation about a number of people who may have done it, but because I'm not personally sure myself and I have no proof of anything, I'm not going to accuse people on this video. I've been against hacking of any sort for years, and I've stated this dozens of times before. Now, whoever hacked the account posted login information onto the public Discord server, which I was able to obtain. When I logged into the account, the contacts, friends, server list, profile image, everything on the account was blank. In fact, I wasn't really sure if it was a real account at all. However, when I test messaged Divine Axios, I realized that indeed all the old chat logs were present, and the account was real. You see, in Discord, when he deleted DM chat and then restarted, all the old messages are still saved. Whoever actually did take the account and wiped it either didn't consider this, didn't realize it, or didn't think anybody would look into it. Once I realized that the account was real, I attempted to secure the account so as to return it to Ricky Lane. However, doing so would have been effectively impossible without the email address and password, which I didn't have. So here I was, sitting on his account logged in, with access to all of his DMs and no real ability to actually secure the account. I realized that I could either do nothing or attempt to gather information. Obviously, I did the latter, taking screenshots of his DMs with Osari, Axios, Alcus, Shadow Sniper, and a number of other important individuals who he DM'd. This resulted in Ricky leaks, which you can see on the screen now. I want to be clear about this series of leaks. While I certainly had more embarrassing messages from Ricky Lane's account that I could have leaked discussing personal matters, I elected not to. While I understand the leaks already sit in a morally gray area, and even I'm not sure if it was totally the right call, I would hope that my transparency in admitting my involvement and restraining from effectively doxing Ricky Lane and other individuals shows a reasonable standard of conduct, regardless of the events. Fortunately, Ricky Lane was able to recover access to his Discord account, and now he has ownership over it again. So what did Ricky Leaks achieve? More than enough. If you look at the Colonial Federation's Declaration of War video, they specifically use screenshots from Ricky Leaks as evidence for justification of war. This was perhaps the most critical leak dump that led to the NRI Colonial Federation War, and demonstrated that NRI knowingly stole Colonial Federation maps, and NRI and Orda were planning to declare war against Colonial Federation since December. It placed the ball firmly back into the hands of the Colonial Federation's Chancellor and Senate. Within 48 hours of the leaks being posted, Colonial Federation's Senate had authorized the declaration of war, and I was notified of this by Shadow Sniper 172. 1 week later, the Colonial Federation declared war against NRI. It appears that the 9-day delay in the announcement was only to perform final war preparations, produce a video, and other minor internal tasks. It's absolutely clear, given the less than 48-hour delay between the leaks and the authorization to actually declare war, that Ricky Leaks was indeed the definitive event which made the Colonial Federation declare war against NRI. Now, the prelude to this war, I was in talks with the Colonial Federation's diplomatic team and Shadow Sniper, as well as gathering information from my assets within the Colonial Federation. It was clear to me that some fairly significant improvements had been made in the clan, and that they were much more mentally prepared for war than they were during NRI leaks 3 weeks prior. So I fell back into the original plan of creating a stalemate war between the two clans. I also made an effort to use this war as means of improving Exodus' relationship with the Colonial Federation by helping their team prepare for ROE, discussing war plans with Shadow Sniper, and a number of other things. The advice here was genuine. I told Shadow Sniper to negotiate ROE with NRI and Orda separately well before his Senate ever did, and made a number of suggestions which would have benefited them during the war. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Shadow Sniper decided not to follow either my advice nor the advice of the Senate, leading to the eternal dispute and discord in the Colonial Federation's government. So after going down 3-0 in the war, and removing the entire colony after discovering they were spies, it became absolutely clear to me, after discussing with my assets and other individuals knowledgeable in the Colonial Federation's internal state, that they were in effective freefall, and the stability of the clan was indeed in question. Now you notice that, up to this point, Exodus had not entered the war. You also remember that up to this point, I had controlled all the major leaks, and I had maintained direct access to the Colonial Federation's government chat for months. I'll give you a moment to guess who leaked the Colonial Federation chat logs disrespecting Exodus. If you guess that I'm the one who leaked those chat logs which started Exodus' entry into the conflict, you'd be correct. I'd personally been aware of those conversations for months, and elected not to release them to the general public. However, given the near free-fall state of the Colonial Federation and knowledge that NRI may have already had access to these screenshots and leaks, I elected to enter exits into the war on our own terms, as opposed to waiting for NRI to release them. So on March 27th, I contacted Shaky Divine and requested permission to leak the chat logs with the intention of declaring war. He approved. The same evening, I made a new account, CF Leaks, and posted inflammatory comments from the Colonial Federation staff to the community. I spoke with Shadow Sniper and made it clear that it was likely that war was likely to occur unless significant concessions were made. It's in this context that our initial demand for full diplomatic sovereignty over the Colonial Federation can be truly understood. Both myself and Shadow Sniper were fully aware that should Exodus enter the war, the Colonial Federation would not survive. This was, in my opinion, perhaps the only way Exodus could have ensured that the Colonial Federation would not be a continued threat to Exodus even after my departure from the clan. My previous video discussed this in detail. While the initial terms may have been too strong, they would have satisfied our concern and allowed the Colonial Federation to continue as opposed to ending. However, the Colonial Federation, as we all know, declined the offer and all following offers, causing Exodus to enter the war. By that point, Exodus had was effectively unlimited access to the Colonial Federation's government. We had recordings of Senate meetings, government chat access, and even limited HICOM access. Their government was effectively transparent to us, and given my knowledge of this type of war, picking apart the government became a fairly trivial exercise. Our demands for raids and battles were more targeted simply providing our members something to do and some sense of participation in the war than they were actively critical to defeating and destroying the Colonial Federation. By this point, I was able to throw the full ability of Exodus to contact Colonial Federation personnel and encouraging defection and dissent. During this process, we contacted a number of clans, namely UGN and AI, and shared to them critically some Colonial Federation's government chat, which promoted their limited entry into the conflict. It's logical to conclude that, had I not shared this information, they may not have entered the conflict. By the time we withdrew from the war, the clan was effectively terminal. We had already received confirmation that the Colonial Federation intended to make its own community, rendering any effort to continue the war moot. As a result, within 24 hours of Exodus withdrawing from the war, the Colonial Federation had disbanded. And that, my friends, is an overview of the Colonial Federation's collapse, and how it helped facilitate the process. NRI and Order were, in my opinion, simply a useful tool in a bigger move here. The actual escalation of the event, and the most damaging blows to the Colonial Federation, came from my desk. But I'd like to think that, now that Exodus has ended, an interesting question appears to arise. If Exodus is going to end anyways, why kill the Colonial Federation? I think my answer here is two parts. First, at the time Exodus entered the war, terminating Exodus was not being considered. My personal interest in resigning was already known, but no definite date was set. As such, long-term preservation of Exodus was still a priority in these decisions, and I acted accordingly. The second part is much more selfish, but equally true. I wanted to see if I could. It's not every day you find a legitimate reason to actually target a clan so large, and I wanted to see that if I could actually orchestrate a blind proxy war on this scale. As you can see, plans this size never go entirely as you would hope, and being able to improvise and react effectively is always a challenge. It's truly been a few years since I've been given the opportunity to actually pursue plans of this scale. It's easily one of the most challenging moments that I've had as CFAO, stretching over nearly 6 weeks, from the Armas leaks on February 18th to the collapse of Colonial Federation on April 3rd. I've said in the intro in the video, however, I'd like to apologize to Char 3 for his removal from the Colonial Federation due to my actions. While I don't necessarily regret the decision given the context, I'm aware of the impact of his career in the community, and I would hope that publicly correcting this may help reopen doors for him into the community moving forward. That's all for this video. As I said, over the coming weeks and months I may discuss other important events that occurred during my time at CFAO or give general insight into more interesting and perhaps less understood aspects of operating in the foreign affairs domain in the modern community. With that said, I'd like to thank you for your time. This is Power, out.